9, we're looking at Canada, our neighbors to the north, and basically we're looking at similarities and, I guess, dissimilarities. Things we have in common and things we don't have in common. So similar to the US, Canada's native population was colonized and then dominated. After that, they became dependent upon the dominant group. Both the US and Canada have been and still are the targets for waves of immigration from virtually every country. Both are among the most ethnically diverse countries in the world.
These are the top 10 countries with the most foreign-born immigrants living there, and where the different groups in each country came from, according to a 2013 report by the United Nations. Number 8 is Canada. Even though Canada and America share one of the longest borders in the world, there are only 317,000 Americans living north of its northern border. But Canada is home to the biggest Hong Kong community outside of Hong Kong, and to reciprocate, Hong Kong is home to the most Canadians of any city in Asia. And number 1 is the United States of America, with more than 45 million foreign-born residents. 1 in every 5 people in the whole world living outside of their country of birth live in the United States. That's a big deal, and is the single biggest reason why the Americans lead the world both economically and culturally. The nearly 13 million Mexicans living in the United States make up the single largest group of immigrants anywhere in the world. Today, Asians, which includes and is driven by Chinese and Indians, are the largest immigrant group coming to America.
Much like the US, Canada saw large numbers of immigration from every country from the 1800s clear on up to the 1920s. During about the same time that the US made the Chinese Exclusion Act permanent in 1907, Canada too put an exclusionary act in place in 1923. And in 1962 and 1967, Canada abolished any and all racial discriminatory immigration policies. Around that same time, the US signed the 1965 Immigration Act, which too effectively abolished anti-immigration policies.
So Canada was not an empty land when the settlers arrived. It's actually estimated that there were around 500,000 people from these native communities who signed agreements with the British and the French authorities. They even participated in the battles that protected the independence of Canada.
Canada would be American today if not for the Indian allies who fought for the crown. Peter Russell.
Oh yes, the US really did try to invade Canada more than once. Well, the problem is that despite being the first people in this land, and despite the fact that they participated and contributed to the independence of the country, the natives suffered clear cultural persecution. Yep, as a result of that obsession some have to create homogeneous national identities, Canada went through a period of persecuting the natives. For years, these people suffered the occupation of their territories and were sent away to reservations, which sometimes didn't even have the basic conditions that would allow for their survival. Furthermore, both their language and their cultural and religious rituals were sometimes forbidden. This persecution, it reached such a point that the authorities set up a system of residences and boarding schools for the children of native families. The government took the children from the families and sent them to schools where they would receive an education which was fully Western so that they could lose all aspects of their cultural identity. Tens of thousands of children.
So we had quite a bit in common. Now, definitely not to the same severity, not to the same intensity. Now, for some of the ways in which Canada differs. Canada is a two-nation society with two distinct cultural groups, so effectively there's two dominant groups in Canadian society.
Now, you see, Canada is officially a bilingual country. It has 2 official languages, French and English. It says so right in the Canadian Constitution.
The major issue in Canadian society is its French and English conflict over French demanding they preserve their uniqueness within the English Canadian society, and namely their language.
The Quebec government believes that preserving Quebec's distinct culture is one of its primary obligations, and since Quebecers believe that language and culture are basically the same thing, this has resulted in a lot of very strict language laws in Quebec designed to ensure that Quebecers speak French as much as possible, and conversely be exposed to English as little as possible. So among other things, the laws of Quebec make it very difficult for you to send your child to an English school or otherwise get an English education. And if you want to put English on any sort of public thing, like a sign or a building or whatever, you have to put French on it as well, and the French has to be bigger. When you live in Canada, one of the great sort of familiar tropes of Canadian journalism is these crazy stories about the Quebec Language Police, which is an actual thing, cracking down on people who have had the audacity to use non-French words in some sort of public context.
Quebec French language officers visited Cheesy Luigi's over a complaint about its sign. They delivered this notice, took a picture, and said they'd be back.
The actual name of the business, Cheesy Luigi's, it's kind of hard to translate into French.
The office is telling companies they could face fines. It's arguing that all those famous trademark names on signs don't have to be changed, but they have to include a French descriptor.
The 17-year-old graphic designer tried to register his company, but was told by the Quebec Business Registry that he couldn't because the company's name is too English.
Several restaurants say they were targeted as well. This one for English art on the wall, this one for things like the word steak on the chef's shopping list, and this one, which was told to change its name.
Gone are the colorful spoons at Menchie's frozen yogurt shop in Dollard. Instead, patrons have to make do with these. The reason? A complaint to the province's language police over 4 little words. This is my mix. These 4 words engraved on the spoons are too much for the Office Québécoise de la langue française.
All right, boys, prepare yourselves. We're about to enter French Canada.
French Canada?
There's no Canada like French Canada. It's the best Canada in the land. The other Canada is hardly Canada. If you lived here for a day, you'd understand.
Ho, ho, ho! Welcome to French Canada! We have everything a heart could desire. Trapezes, trampolines, and lots of cheese. Would you like a mustache?
That being said, Canada has a more of a pluralistic approach to absorbing different ethnic groups. Effectively, they have implemented corporate pluralism. Canada didn't have institutionalized slavery like the US did. Thus, they haven't experienced the same African resentment/tension that the US did. Generally speaking, Canada has been a more relaxed, welcoming, and harmonious multi-ethnic society than, say, the US. People just of different races in Canada just get along better.
The Canadian Mosaic.
But what's all this Canadian multiculturalism? I mean, what's it all really about? Well, basically, it consists of accepting that cultural diversity is not a threat, but it's an asset and a source of opportunities for a country. Now, of course, this multiculturalism is always subordinate to a core set of values, such as democracy, such as the rule of law, and equality for all people. Now, this means that in order to be Canadian and be welcomed into their country, you don't have to replace your culture with any other, like the Canadian culture. You just have to accept and commit to those core Canadian values. And I mean, look, Canada has one of the largest populations of immigrants in the world. 1 out of every 5 Canadians weren't born in Canada. And I mean, for some cities like Toronto, this figure it grows up to 50% or even higher. In the year 2016 alone, Canada admitted to its country more than 300,000 immigrants. That is close to 1% of Canada's total population. Further, this is a greater portion than any other developed country. And do note here that this is nothing new. This is something that's been going on for 2 decades. If you really think about it, it does make sense. Employment is the country's most productive asset, so why would they want to prevent it from growing? In the context of a dynamic economy, what's the harm of immigrants who are willing to work, who are willing to set up companies, and want to get an education? Hold on a second, because immigration to Canada isn't totally free. In fact, it's not as free as we at VisualPolitik would like. But what's really important here is not whether there are not excessive administrative difficulties, but rather that citizens shouldn't automatically view those who are immigrating to the country as criminals. And this is precisely why Canada is so successful. They are a country that takes pride in looking for additional citizens. They are not looking for temporary immigrants. Since 1967, immigration to Canada has been based on a points system. This system considers qualifications, experience, professional skills, and a knowledge of either French or English. In the same way, the system also gives priority to those who are needed by Canada's companies. And the results support these policies indeed. In the last decade, Canada's growth has been bigger than the US, the UK, and Germany, and its citizens enjoy a very high standard of living.
The ethnic composition of Canada is just insane. It's just, if I were to read off the entire list, I'm not going to read off the list. It would take forever. And as you can imagine, as we've kind of seen before, it's a trend that white Anglo-Saxon people tend to be at the top of this pyramid in terms of the social hierarchy. People of British origin rule the roost, so to speak.
King in the castle, king in the castle. Oh, go do this, king in the castle.
Followed by the French, and later followed by basically anyone that's non-French, non-British, kind of at the bottom of that pyramid. However, in recent years, we've begun to see this gap begin to diminish.
Blades, go buy them.
Oh, fuck! Dang it!
Abba Zabba, you my only friend.